on our Facebook page on Hot Country Hits 99.9 and 102.7 WMOM, and as well our YouTube channel in the studio this morning, and we appreciate them coming in. We've got Amanda Nassor, Associate Director of COVE. Thank you for coming in this morning. Let's turn on your microphones. I got to always do that, or people are going to be like, hey, where are these people? But we appreciate you coming in this morning.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. And also in the studio with us, we have Marie Jensen. Marie is the Director of Adult Services at West Michigan Community Mental Health, and we appreciate you coming in. You have been here before, so that's a good thing. Amanda, you're the one on the hot seat sometimes with maybe a little nervousness, but you'll do fine. You'll do great. Absolutely. Let's talk about this when we talk about Domestic Violence Awareness Month. And we always see that each month has a certain association. We talk about cancer, we talk about domestic violence and other issues and that affect our lives if we're connected with it, or if it's just an opportunity for us to have a conversation like today. Mm-hmm. And Amanda, we'll start with you as Associate Director of COVE there. You have individuals, primarily women, that come into COVE. I don't know if it's on a daily basis, but certainly there's a lot of activity weekly that you are helping individuals here in the community. So let's kind of dive into it, and how at COVE do you explain, or how would you explain October as Domestic Violence Awareness Month, if you would start with us that way?
Yeah, I think it's just a month to really talk about what domestic violence is. We always are discussing domestic violence and sexual assault, but everyone kind of has a different definition for it. And so it's important to understand what it is, specifically how we define it at COVE for eligibility purposes. So at COVE, we really define it as an imbalance of power. So whenever there is that someone exerting power over you in an intimate partner relationship. So for COVE services, it is intimate partner violence only. Our sexual assault is different. That's for anyone. However, we really define domestic violence as that imbalance of power. There's so many pieces of it. We refer a lot to the power and control wheel, and there's just so many different aspects of domestic violence that we could do a whole entire show just about those different pieces.
Absolutely. And between the two of you, do you both use that power and the elements of the power and control wheel? Is that what you use too?
Sure. And I think, part of that, to kind of get more into what that is. So it looks at the fact that domestic violence can be more than just physical violence. I think we talk a lot about that, but it can also be emotional violence, even financial abuse. So basically taking control of someone's finances to put them in that power and control struggle. So yeah, we talk a lot about that at CMH as well, because that plays largely into our mental health and how we feel about ourselves, who we define ourselves as, how we have any supports left in our life. A lot of times that power and control takes the people away from people that are supportive of them and just keeps them with their abuser. And as you're talking about that, I could just imagine those scenarios that are out there. Do you mind? Could we break down? And you said that it could be a complete, a huge topic, Amanda. But could we break down the power and control wheel? Is there an opportunity to do that? And maybe you take the first half of it, and then Marie takes the second half of it. Would you do that for me?
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the big ones that isn't always recognized for people, they come to COVE and they say, well, I don't know if this is domestic violence or not, is that isolation piece. That's kind of the beginning of I'm being taken away from my support, my family, my friends. I'm being placed in a situation where maybe I can't go to work, or I'm not trusted to go to work. And so then you start getting into that financial piece. Now I'm totally dependent on this other person. Therefore, I'm kind of under their control as far as whether it's buying groceries or even having a vehicle to be able to escape if I wanted to. And then with that comes all of the psychological factors that come with that power and control. As Marie said, you start really doubting the person that you are. Your identity kind of merges into another person's and what they expect and want from you. I hear a lot of people all the time say, well, how does that even happen? How do you get under someone's control where you can't can't even get out, or you don't even know how to, start the process. And it really is part of that psychological piece of it, where you just lose that hope and will that there is something different out here. So those are kind of the beginning pieces of the power and control wheel, and how it can just manifest into something bigger, where that lethality kind of gets a little more extreme, and that physical safety starts to come into play.
And two questions come up from that. I guess the first is, and you sort of answered that as well, you largely answered it, is most people think, well, how can you be with that person if they're treating you that way, and they're doing that to you and breaking away? I guess that's the first question, if you can dive a little bit more into that. But the second question is, what is the person that is the abuser? Why are they doing that in most cases? Do you mind tackling those two, if you don't mind?
Sure. I think for a lot of it is just that for some abusers, it's really just a lack of their own feeling of I can be a good person, or I can be a solid person without having control over someone else. For a lot of abusers, that really fills a need for them. That control helps them feel good about themselves. And that is a slippery slope, because in a relationship, there has to be that balance. Otherwise, you do start, trickling into that domestic violence. And as I said, a lot of people don't even really recognize that the relationship that they're in is domestic violence. And so that's why it's really important to approach survivors in a really trauma-informed way, because there are so many different aspects of what a person goes through. Even an abuser, looking through all of the lenses to really get a clear picture on how can you help the person in front of me. But a lot of it is just that power and control, and that need to kind of fill that if I don't have power over someone, I'm absolutely powerless. And that's one of the things that we see a lot.
Absolutely. And we appreciate you talking about that. Marie, same sort of idea is that if you can dovetail off of that, I would assume that just listening to Amanda, you have additional input in regards to this. What, is there different scenarios of this? Is there, and I think what Amanda said is a very important part, is that sometimes people do not realize they're in this situation. They just think that this is a part of the course, right? And maybe it'll get better. And I would assume months and years and time passes then at that point.
Sure. And so domestic violence is usually termed as like a chronic trauma. So that means repeated, prolonged exposure to something that's traumatic. So a lot of times it just kind of unfortunately becomes commonplace, and people kind of forget this isn't really a good way to be treated, or they don't even maybe notice some of that power and control happening because it's gradual. So yeah, we talk a lot with people about how do you manage your mental health? How do you manage being someone who's a trauma survivor, and learning who you are again, and learning that that can be different. Your life can look different. It changed before. It can change again. So yeah, I think noting that it's a lot different than maybe one traumatic event, because a lot of times domestic violence is a prolonged exposure, is something that occurs multiple different ways, like Amanda pointed out, but also over periods of time. And people can be in those situations for a very long time. They can be in multiple situations as well. They might get out of a domestic violence situation, have a period of time where they're not in a relationship, get into another one, unfortunately. So we talk about that kind of being more of a chronic trauma experience.
And we're talking with, if you're just joining us, we're talking with Marie Jensen from West Michigan Community Mental Health, Director of Adult Services there. Amanda Nassor, Associate Director of COVE, two organizations teaming up together as we bring more light to Domestic Violence Awareness Month. Marie, let's talk a little bit about the relationship between COVE and West Michigan Community Mental Health. How does that work?
Sure. So we recently actually signed what we call a care coordination agreement, basically saying that we're going to work together. We may serve common people in the area, And we want to just make sure that we're doing that efficiently and effectively as possible. So what we were able to do is have very good training from COVE come in to learn more about domestic violence, what to look for, and even just to learn how each agency works, because though we might serve similar populations, we do work differently because we're different agencies with different confidentiality guidelines and things like that. So it's been really helpful for us to build this partnership because we do, we are in a small rural area and we're stronger together than we are apart. And so we need to, work together with every, community support agency in the area. So
very important because we don't know, Amanda, who's going to walk into COVE versus West Michigan Community Mental Health. And if that comes up again and they need those resources, they might not be in the same situation to repeat going into the same location, right?
Right. And the reality is you can't talk about domestic violence or sexual assault and not talk about mental health. You are dealing with a lot of different levels of trauma. And as Marie said, we're usually working with the same people, just in different lanes. So being able to have them as a resource to be able to talk and communicate about what's going on and how we can better help and support people is really vital to make sure that we're taking care of our communities.
Very important. You both have used the word trauma today. There's a 3 E's of trauma. Amanda, do you mind kind of diving into that if you don't mind?
Sure. So one thing about COVE that's really unique is that we all kind of have this lens of being trauma informed. It's really important then when you're working with people to have that lens. So what we do is we talk about and we train advocates the 3 E's of trauma, and that would be the effect, the experience, and the event. And so it's really important to kind of talk through some of those so you can better approach a person who's been through trauma. So with the experience, it's really just everything we go through is totally subjective to our already lived experiences. So that could also be your cultural and just your internal morals that you have. So anytime you go through a traumatic event, you're going to filter it through some of that. So it's going to look different for everyone. So if we can understand that my experience, even though I may have had a similar traumatic experience as you, it's going to be different. The effect is also going to be different. A lot of times, we hear, well, that person had a flat affect. They don't really act like somebody who just was in a car accident, or they don't act like someone who was just traumatized. And everything affects us differently. So that effect might take in right away after that traumatic event, or it could be years. As well as it could just interfere with normal day-to-day things that you or I just see as kind of easy and just kind of that daily activities. It could really interfere with people coping with just daily things.
Do you go ahead? Do you ever see people come in? You'd mentioned that it might have happened years ago. Do people actually come in and say, this has been kind of burning at me in the sense for a long time?
Actually, we see when we have events or when we're on the radio, when there is Domestic Violence Awareness Month and people hear us, we get a lot of calls saying, man, I heard the segment and this did happen to me a long time ago. And it's something that, I never reached out for services or my family didn't support me through that. And so now they're just kind of, some of those feelings are just coming back up. And so having that support is really, really important. We also see that secondary trauma. So something unique about COVE that doesn't get talked a lot about is for our sexual assault services, it affects the whole family. And so we do provide secondary services to individuals whose close family member or friend has been sexually assaulted.
All right. Good information this morning. If you're just joining us, we're talking with Amanda Nassor, Associate Director of COVE, and Marie Jensen, the COVE board member and Director of Adult Services for West Michigan Community Mental Health. Before we wrap up, I think it's important to direct our attention to those that might be listening that are dealing with this, or maybe, and I think it's important to bring up that might not be able to identify that they're going through this. So, Marie, if you don't mind, for the next few moments, take us through, if somebody's listening, those red flag signs, if we could, that hey, this is something that you should kind of look at identify and then reach out to either one of your services, if you don't mind.
Sure. So a big common thing you might hear is maybe flashbacks to those events, nightmares around those events, anticipating and having intense anxiety, thinking it's going to happen again, or even just intense anxiety doing everyday things where typically you wouldn't have had that level of anxiety or discomfort. That isolation piece is huge. So if someone maybe was a very outgoing, boisterous person and now they're isolative and very quiet and Amanda said flat affect, that just means basically a void of emotion. Okay. Those kinds of things impacting your ability to work, your ability to go about your life. I mean, once it starts really making those impacts, definitely give us a call. And even before that, if you have questions, feel free to give us a call or call COVE. We can help walk you through that.
And I know we've talked about this before, but what about those that might be scared, might be, the retaliation that could happen, all of that we hear about. And I guess, Amanda, does that happen? Is that actual or a real possibility if somebody reaches out that they would be worried about that? And how do you respond to that?
Yeah, it happens all the time. Mostly, that is why people don't report. That's why people don't seek out support. There's this judgment that comes with it too. How could you allow yourself to get in this situation? And then kind of the fallout of what happens. When you're with somebody, there's a lot of things. You have children, you have homes. There's a lot of things that you really have to factor in of what's going to happen once I do decide to leave this relationship. So, relationships are not black and white. Mm-hmm. There's so much gray. And I think that's the big thing of people just not jumping to judge a person or have some of those biases, because that really takes away from people reaching out and getting that support. Okay.
Can people in those situations truly say enough is enough? I need to get out, and there's a safety net at both COVE and West Michigan CMH for them.
Yeah, at COVE, that's what we're there for. If you need to leave, we don't care if you've left 100 times before. You can come back as many times as you need, and whether that looks like you take that time to just rest and take care of yourself, or it means I'm finally done. I'm gonna dive into all the community resources and kind of get my life moving here. That's gonna be totally up to you. So we want people to know that yes, I don't care if you've came to COVE 100 million times, you keep coming until you feel good enough to finally stand on your own and move forward in whatever direction you decide.
All right. And Marie, COVE and CMH services offer to assist during the crisis. There's the 800 number, which is 800-992-2061. 7 days a week, 24/7, 365. The emergency crisis line. And we talked about COVE. People can walk in that door any time of the day or night, right?
Yep, 24 hours a day.
So, Marie, how important is it to have these services available for these individuals night and day?
Oh, extremely important. You can never, there is no control over when somebody is ready to call, needs to call, even who is calling. A lot of times we get calls from law enforcement officers who went out to a home, ER doctors, things like that. So everyone needs to be able to have access no matter what day it is, whether it's a holiday, a 2 a.m. phone call, whatever it is, because you can't control that. There isn't a set schedule when domestic violence occurs or when mental health crises occur. So we need to be available and accessible all the time.
All right. Good information this morning. If you just joined us talking this morning, Amanda Nassor, Associate Director of COVE, Marie Jensen, COVE Board Member and Director of Adult Services for West Michigan CMH. If you missed any of this segment, you can watch it in its entirety on our Facebook pages, Hot Country Hits 99.9, as well as WMOM, and our YouTube channel. But it's so important that if you're in this situation, and it doesn't have to be because it's Domestic Violence Awareness Month, but if you're in this situation, don't let that next day go by and the next day and so on and so forth. I think, Amanda, people get stuck, right? And they don't have to. Okay, well, we appreciate you taking the time this morning. Anything that we missed talking about, anything that we forgot to talk about for you?
No, I just think that, people reach out regardless if you identify as a survivor, victim, let us know how we can help you.
All right, very important. And same thing, Marie, that we talked a lot about the individual that's in the situation, but we as a community need to continue to talk about this subject because we don't know who is in the situation, right?
Correct. And mental health, I mean, we've talked about this and we have this wonderful opportunity every month to come talk about that. And, a lot of times there is a stigma towards mental health. There is still a stigma, unfortunately, towards being in that domestic violence situation. So the more we talk about it, more avenues like this we have, the better. And as a community, we can come together and help people.
All right. Sounds good. Appreciate both of you coming in this morning. As always, that number for West Michigan CMH, 1-800-992-2061, and as well, COVE available 24/7. So we appreciate both of you for coming in this morning. It is 102.7 WMOM and